Today we're going to look at how we can find the volume of a sphere. A sphere looks like a ball. Sometimes you could see it real well when you think about a basketball. How much air, how much space can fit inside of that. So what we're going to look at is how do we calculate the volume of a sphere? And what is the volume of a sphere? Well, the volume of a sphere is the space that is inside the sphere. So the second thing that we want to look at is how do we calculate the sphere? So again, at any time, just like we have in the past, if you need to pause this video so that you can fill in your notes as you go along, please do so. Or if you need to rewind to hear something again, please do so. The other thing is if you are working through something that's just not making sense, you have a question as you're watching, please pause your video and make sure you ask the question so that you can address what that issue is. So we know the volume of a sphere is the space inside the sphere. How do we figure that out? How do we calculate that? Well, one way that we're going to do that is we are going to use the volume V. V stands for the volume of the sphere, and it is 4/3 as a fraction times the cube of the radius r. Well, just like a circle, we know what radius is. In this picture of this sphere right here, we can see that the radius, which is the center of the sphere to any edge, is 3 centimeters. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this formula right over here, where volume is equal to 4/3 times pi times the radius cubed. So really all we have to know in order to solve this is we have to know what is the radius. So in this case, we know what the radius is. We're going to just plug numbers into our formula, starting with 4/3. Then we're going to multiply it by pi, which we're still going to use 3.14. Then we're going to multiply it by the radius, which in this case is 3, and we're going to cube it. So you might be asking yourself, well, how do I enter that information into a calculator? So I'm going to show you. So again, that formula was 4/3 times pi, which we're using 3.14, times 3 cubed. So the first thing you have to do is you have to identify where is the fraction button on our calculator. So I find the fraction button on my calculator, which is right here. You can click that button and then you can type in the number 4, then use your arrow down so that you can fill in the denominator as 3, then make sure you arrow to the right. So use your arrow to the right. Once you do that, you now have the fraction entered in as 4/3. And we now need to hit multiplication. So hit your multiplication button, type in 3.14, multiply again, and then times 3 to the 3rd power. In order to do 3 to the 3rd power, we're going to hit 3. This little guy right here is our exponent key, so we can use that if we want to raise it to any power. So exponent 3, then hit enter. Once you do that, you type in 4/3 times 3.14 times 3 to the 3rd. You should get an answer of 113 400. This is volume. This is a 3-dimensional shape. So we know that based on our picture, it was centimeters. So we need to label it centimeters cubed. Cubed because it's 3-dimensional. Okay? So make sure, take a pause here. Make sure you can type that into your calculator and you too can reach the answer of 113 400. So like I said, we're going to look at lots of different examples. The one thing we have to know is what the radius is. So this one says find the volume of a sphere with the radius 9. Perfect. We know the radius is given. So we're going to use our formula, 4/3 times pi. We're going to use 3.14 times our radius, which in this case is 9, and then raise it to the power of 3. So go ahead and try that. Your answer should be 3,052 800. The label was feet, so we need to label it feet, 3-dimensional, so cubed. All right, I would like for you to pause now, and I would like for you to try this one. So I'll tell you the formula, and I'll let you try it on your calculator. So again, always the same formula, 4/3 times pi, which you know is 3.14, times our radius, which in this case is 4.5, and then raise it to the power of 3. Go ahead and pause right now, and then see if you can reach the same answer. All right, now that you've done that, your answer should have been 381 and 51/100 feet cubed. Now, what do you do if the radius isn't given? So I've put a couple more examples on here. You're not going to flip your paper over to the back, but you can draw these pictures off to the side or just label them. So in our first example, we know our radius is 5. So that's pretty straightforward. Use 4/3 times pi times the radius, which is 5, cubed. But notice in my second example, they didn't give me the radius, they gave me the diameter. So we know from future lessons or previous lessons that the diameter is half, or the diameter needs to be divided by 2 in order to find the radius. So if the diameter is 18, in this case, our radius should be 9. So then, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. We know that the diameter is 18, but if we divide it by 2, our radius is 9. So we have a radius of 9. We're going to do 4/3 times pi times our radius, which is 9, and cubed. So go ahead and pause. See if you can find both answers to both of these problems. All right, so I went ahead and solved both answers. In the first one, reached 523. My calculator showed me a repetition of 3, so I put 3 with bar notation on the top and then label as inches cubed. My second example, 3,052 and 8/100 inches cubed. Now, what happens if we have a hemisphere? Well, the question is how does this hemisphere compare to a sphere? What you might notice is this hemisphere is half of a sphere. So we're going to follow the same formula of 4/3 times pi times the radius cubed, but then what's the last thing we need to do? Because it's half, at the end we find our answer and we divide it by 2. So go ahead and pause, see if you can do this one on your own. So when I went ahead and I typed in 4/3 times pi, my radius in this case is 12, which was given, and then I made sure I took 12 to the 3rd power. From here I got an answer of 7,234.56. But because this is half of a sphere, I need to take that number and I need to divide it by 2, and then I get a final answer. I'm going to write it up here at the top of 3,617.28, and it's meters cubed. So there's my final answer. So the only difference with a hemisphere is at the end you divide by 2 because it's half of that of a sphere. Now we're going to take it one step further. So I have this silo, okay? I have a silo which is partially a cylinder and partially a hemisphere. What we need to do is we need to figure out what is the volume of the entire object. So we have to find the volume of the cylinder and we have to find the volume of the hemisphere. So let's start with the hemisphere since that's fresh. We have 4/3 times pi times the radius, which in this case is 13 cubed. So this is for the hemisphere. Well, they tell us that the radius is 13, which is right here. Now the radius of the sphere and the radius of the cylinder are going to be the exact same because the sphere fits perfectly on top of the cylinder. Now my formula to find the volume of a cylinder is I'm going to find the area of the circle, which is pi times the radius squared, and then I have to multiply it by the height, which in this case is 42. So we need to find the answers to both of those. So let's start with the volume of the hemisphere. Now you may have noticed I have a formula for a sphere, but in order to find the hemisphere, I need to divide it by 2. So go ahead, type in 4/3 times pi times 13 to the 3rd power. And then at the end, you have to divide that by 2. And go ahead and round this answer to the nearest whole number. I get 4,599. And I do have a decimal, but I'm rounding it to the nearest whole number. Now let's go ahead and find the volume of the cylinder. So my radius here is going to be 13 again, so we're going to put 13 in there. So we're going to do 3.14 times 13 squared times my height of the cylinder, which is 42, and I get an answer of 22,287, and we'll round that to the nearest whole number, which is going to round it up to 22,288. Now I found the volume of this, and I found the volume of this, so the last thing I have to do is I have to add the 2 together. When I add the 2 together, I have a grand final answer of 26,886.72, and we're going to round it up to the nearest whole number, so that's actually going to be 87. And then my label, because I have feet and because it's 3-dimensional, is feet cubed. Okay? What you need to do now is I need you to focus on how to find the volume of a sphere and how to find the volume of a hemisphere. So what you need to do right now is go ahead and turn this off, come find myself, and get started with the 6-4 worksheet that deals with finding the volume of spheres and of hemispheres.